Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening to our audio and video presentation. My name is Melissa Kidder. I'm a professor at Ohio Northern University, and I'm in charge of the clinic and externship program at our law school. And with me, given the topic of our conversation, I thought it was important that we had a student's perspective on some of these topics. So, Amanda, you want to introduce yourself to everyone?
Yes, my name is Amanda Olson, and I am a graduating 3L from Ohio Northern University.
When I saw the topic, I was talking to Amanda about, some ways that she thought students had been engaged or thought worked in the transition with this coronavirus to the online platform that we all had to do like so immediate. I thought it'd be great to get her involved with this presentation as well. And so we put together this, kind of 5 small ways that students thought worked in terms of helping them stay engaged when we made the switch to online learning, so that other professors, if they were looking at ways to try to integrate engaging methods, could, have rest at ease that it's not very complicated. And there's just some small things that they can do to try to, keep students engaged if we have to continue to do this. So the 5 things that we kind of came up with are humor and entertainment, engagement during in-class discussions, check-ins that professors did, some student recordings, and some in-class visuals that happened during the course of the lecture. So I'll let Amanda take over for the humor and entertainment section.
So I found that my class in general had used humor a lot to cope during this unprecedented time. And for example, as you can see here, my wills professor actually sent us a rules against perpetuities to be able to wash your hands to for 20 seconds. And so we found that humor from our professors was actually really helpful to try to make things a little bit more lighthearted. So whether that was emails, online discussion boards, professors would try to use memes, GIFs, or mention YouTube videos about songs for switching to remote learning and showing pictures like the one above. So I found that humor and entertainment was a very big and positive way that my class in general found to be engaging. And so what did you use humor to engage with your students, Professor Kidder?
I did try to do it in small ways. I didn't try to do a mass amounts of things. But I tried to do some small things, like I have a pretrial litigation class that I teach, and so I try to find an entertaining deposition that we could watch during the class and, have a way to laugh about it. And then also talk about some important things like professional skills when you're doing and conducting a deposition. The students, and I'm sure Amanda can attest, were all into this Tiger King, and they were talking about it before class. So I thought I would watch it over the weekend so that I could participate in the class discussions. I mean, it didn't lend itself to anything that we were talking about in class, but I thought it was a nice way to kind of relate and be relatable. And again, it's a stressful time. So I thought it was a nice way to, be in the know and participate in the before class discussions that were happening with students online. That kind of leads us into the other topic about what professors did during class to try to keep students engaged besides humor and entertainment. Amanda, what other things did you find helpful while professors were giving lectures?
I found it actually very helpful that some professors added guidelines for participation during class, whether that was adding points to try to contribute to questions or add thoughts or ideas depending on what we were discussing that day, and also adding discussion threads for legal topics. That was an opportunity for us to be able to expand upon things that we briefly touched upon in class, but then also interact with our classmates if we had a question as to why they thought a certain way or wanted to get a little bit more understanding based on what they had posted.
Yeah, I tried to, in class, it wasn't, I didn't try to make everything engaging because some things are just, topics you have to, and content you have to deliver. But I did find adding in one or two multiple choice questions in my PowerPoint slides, or even a poll, just a question that I polled the class doing, and asked a question, and then we talked about it either in class or we had a discussion in the chat function of Zoom or Google Meet. I felt like it was a nice way to kind of break up the discussion and kind of like bring some different perspective, besides just a traditional Socratic method lecture. Um, that also, trying to engage the students in more of a informal way brings us to the third topic about check-ins. Amanda, do you want to kind of give the audience some kind of discussion about how that was helpful to you guys?
Yeah, so my professors would check on us during class, and that seemed to be a pretty regular thing, either at the start of each week or checking in on us at the beginning of each class. And if they had noticed that someone was missing, they would ask if we had heard from them. And then I think behind the scenes would definitely be reaching out just during this time to attempt to be supportive. I think there was an underlying almost pressure for us as the students to try to show up to every remote class because we were at home. So for the professors to reach out meant a lot, and they wanted to be able to either ask that to the class, or it even asked if they should form maybe a Google form for people to respond more individually. But when professors would share with us about how they were handling everything with the shift online and what was going on with them, it seemed to make my classmates open up more, and that seemed to make a huge impact of how we were doing, and them checking in was really positive. So how did you check in with your students when we had transitioned to online learning?
Yeah, with having some students all over the place with externships, I mean, a lot of my students were in different places where they couldn't complete their hours, and so I had to give them a lot of additional assignments to do, and they needed a lot of different various hours. So I tried to find a time in the day, or I found a time in the week that everyone was available, that we could all get together and just talk remotely about how things were going. And I gave like a little bit of an assignment that wasn't a lot of work, like either watching a couple TED Talk videos or reading a blog post about, telecommunications or teleremote working. And then we would just talk about how things were going, how their hours were going, how classes were going. And I know that that wasn't what they had intended to sign up for when they took an externship. But I felt like it was an opportunity, and they really opened up to tell me how things were going with them. And it was also an opportunity for me to kind of relate and tell them what we've been struggling with as professors and what I was struggling with individually as a person. So I think it was kind of helpful on both fronts, to have check-ins for students and for professors as well. The fourth category that we had kind of talked about with these student recordings, and Amanda, I thought this was really interesting that some of my colleagues were doing. Can you explain what one of your professors did here?
Yeah, so student recordings is actually something that I used weekly as we started online. So during my trial advocacy class, we were required to illustrate a new skill each week in the classroom. So once we were no longer in that classroom setting, we were still tasked to be able to show skills that we would have learned. And so using the case file that we had prepared from, we had to record ourselves giving opening statements, directing cross-examinations of dealing with experts, and then near the end of the semester, we worked and presented our closing arguments. So I found myself being able to be more engaged through this process by recording myself and then being able to give that back to my professor for feedback, and also be able to share that with classmates. So were you able to use any student recordings on your end to be able to engage students?
I didn't have them record themselves, but I definitely had them do the same types of things in the classroom setting. So with the externships who were not able to go into court anymore because courts were all shut down, I gave them some opportunities and some hypotheticals where they could give a closing argument to me, or with an opposing party or opposing counsel, or a closing statement. And then in our clinic, because I run our clinic program as well here at Ohio Northern, we had a lot of students who had hearings scheduled who weren't able to participate in those hearings because, again, courts closed down when the coronavirus hit. So we still had them working on their cases just like they would have been going to trial, and we had them present either in a recording or in the classroom setting in their closing arguments and opening statements, so we could give them feedback and still give them the same type of experience that they would have gotten, despite the fact that they couldn't go into the courtrooms anymore. So we tried to do what we could to provide as best of an experiential opportunity given the circumstances we had, especially in the skills and experiential learning classes. I think then that brings us to our last comment about in-class visuals. Amanda, what were some of the things that my colleagues did, your other professors did, that helped stay engaged with visuals during the lectures?
So specifically, my tax professor noticed that with the transition to online learning, we were all struggling to pay attention, and we were struggling to practice components of what we were learning. So what she had offered to do was take the PowerPoints that she had prepared before class, and as we were discussing general concepts that might not have had anything written down on the slides, as we were discussing these concepts and were generally reviewing them, she would go back and type and add to class. Add to the PowerPoint she would send before class. So anything she added, she would make sure it was different than the normal text. She would underline it, she would circle it, she would highlight it. That way we would know this is a topic that we had discussed. And I found it to be very helpful to not only stay engaged during class, but also go back to a concept that felt difficult to grasp and work with it a little bit more.
Yeah, I also tried to do for visuals, instead of me creating the PowerPoint presentations, I had students with their research projects that they were working on, either in the clinic setting or in the externship setting, do presentations to us as the class, so that they were, kind of forced to try to make a discussion on their presentation as engaging as possible. And I figured that they knew better as to how to engage students since they were students. So I tried to have them create their own presentations to present to us, by sharing their screen and doing poll everywhere type of things during their presentations. And I also thought too, my colleagues tried to use the gallery view. Amanda, I know you were talking about that. We also found that pretty helpful in the Zoom and the Google Meet. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the use of gallery view I thought was really helpful when all the professors would ask that we would turn our cameras on. That way we could see if other people looked just as confused as I was, or, just be able to see other people. That way it felt like we were more in a classroom environment. So that was a really positive way to use, a gallery view instead of just being able to see a couple people from our class.
Yeah, it was helpful for us too. I think it was nice to see everybody to see if there was any confusion, to see if, anybody looked like they were maybe checked out. There's always the risk of, having everyone be at home and turning on your cameras and everything. But I think at the end of the day, it kept everybody more feeling like there was an actual classroom environment, even though we weren't in class with each other anymore. So yeah, I would agree. I think that was helpful for everybody. Well, Amanda, I mean, that kind of brings us to the 5 things that we thought we thought you as students thought would be helpful. So I just wanted to thank you for all of your help in this conversation and kind of helping us reflect on how things went from a student's perspective, because I think we talk and think about in the minds of professors how students would have felt it went. And so it's always good to kind of hear from an actual student what the students thought.
Yeah, no problem. I think for all of us it was a new learning curve, and I hope that even both students and professors' perspective can just take the online learning environment and just be able to make that grow depending on what circumstances are for the fall.
Yeah, so, on behalf of all of us, and Amanda and myself included, we want to say, thank you for your time. We hope you stay safe, wash your hands, and try to stay sane in this crazy time we're living in.